The first time my mother used my niece Sophia's death as a weapon against me, I felt the air leave my lungs like someone had punched straight through my chest. Her voice was soft, almost loving, but the words cut deeper than any scream ever could. My name is Elena. I'm 35 now. But when I close my eyes, I can still smell the cinnamon and pine from our family Thanksgivings when everything felt safe. I grew up in a two-story white house with green shutters on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. My father, a retired high school principal, ruled with quiet authority and Sunday morning pancakes. My mother, with her flour-dusted aprons and endless stories, made every room feel like home. My older brother, Marcus, was the golden boy, star athlete, quick smile, the one who could charm his way out of any trouble. I was the quiet daughter, the one who stayed behind to help clear the table, who remembered birthdays and brought soup when someone was sick. When Marcus married Lisa and they brought Sophia into the world, our family finally felt complete. She arrived with a shock of dark curls and the biggest hazel eyes I'd ever seen. From the moment the nurse placed her in my arms in that sterile hospital room, the beeps of monitors, mixing with Lisa's exhausted laugh, I was hers. Auntie Elena, she called me by age 2, running on chubby legs straight into my arms every weekend. I still remember the way her tiny fingers would twist in my hair while I read her The Princess and the Pea. She loved the part where the princess felt the pea through 20 mattresses. Just like me when I can't sleep, Auntie. She'd giggle. Thanksgiving was her favorite day of the year. She'd wake up before dawn, drag her little plastic step stool into the kitchen, and help me roll out pie crusts while flour dusted her nose like snow. The house would fill with the smell of sage-roasted turkey, sweet potatoes caramelizing in the oven, and the sharp tang of cranberry sauce simmering on the stove. Marcus would carry her on his shoulders to hang the children's tablecloth we'd made together with handprints and pink paint. Mom would hum old hymns at the sink. Dad would carve the turkey with that same silver knife he'd used for 30 years. Laughter bounced off the walls like sunlight. In those moments, I believed nothing could ever break us. Then came October 12th, 10 years ago. A rainy night. Sophia was 6. She and Marcus were driving home from a school play rehearsal. One drunk driver. One red light ignored. One phone call that still echoes in my bones. I was at my apartment 2 hours away when Mom's number lit up my screen. Her voice was barely human. Elena, come home. Sophia. She's gone. I drove through the storm, windshield wipers frantic, tears blurring the road. The hospital smelled of bleach and fear. The waiting room chairs were cold plastic. When the doctor finally stepped out, his face already telling the story, my knees buckled. The funeral was a blur of tiny white roses. A child-sized casket I couldn't look at for more than a second, and my mother's wails that sounded like an animal dying. I held everything together. I wrote the eulogy. I made sure Marcus ate at least one bite of food. I sat on the floor with Mom at 3 a.m. while she clutched Sophia's favorite stuffed bunny and whispered, "Why her?" She was only 6. I rubbed her back and said the only thing I could. I'm here, Mom. We'll carry her together. For years afterward, I thought grief had welded us closer. But grief is a strange fire. It can warm you, or it can forge weapons. Slowly, the comments began. A missed weekend visit. Sophia would have been so sad you weren't here. My decision to take a promotion that meant more hours. After everything we lost, how can you put your job before family? Each time I swallowed the sting, convinced myself it was just their pain talking, and stayed a little closer, a little quieter, a little smaller. I had no idea they were learning exactly how sharp Sophia's memory could be when aimed at me. By the time I turned 32, the guilt had become a constant companion. I had carved out a stable life in finance, a cozy 1-bedroom apartment with a tiny balcony, where I grew basil and tomatoes, a job I actually liked, and a few close friends who made me laugh on hard days. When I told my parents I was moving 2 hours away for better opportunities, the kitchen table felt like a courtroom. Mom's eyes filled instantly. She reached for the framed photo of Sophia on the mantel, the one where she's blowing out birthday candles, cheeks puffed, eyes sparkling, and pressed it to her chest. "You're leaving us the way we lost her," she whispered. "Don't you feel how much pain you're causing?" Dad's voice was lower, heavier. "Family stays together, Elena, especially after Sophia. Marcus needs you. We all do." I stayed longer than I should have. Every Sunday drive back home became an emotional minefield. The same oak table, the same faded floral plates, but now conversations always circled back to her. "Remember how Sophia used to beg you to stay and watch one more cartoon?" Mom would say, voice trembling just enough to make me feel like the worst person alive. I'd lie awake in my childhood bedroom that still smelled faintly of the lavender sachets Mom kept in the drawers, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars Sophia and I had stuck on the ceiling together, and wonder if they were right. Was I abandoning them? Was I failing the little girl who once called me her hero? The real fracture came 3 years ago when Grandpa passed. He had been my safe harbor, the one who took me fishing at dawn when I was 10 and told me, "You've got fire in you, kiddo. Don't let anyone put it out." His estate was significant: the family house, 3 rental properties, investments, and savings that, once tallied, exceeded $7 million. His will was crystal clear, written in his careful, slanted handwriting. A generous portion was earmarked for a scholarship fund in Sophia's name, for children who lose a parent too soon, he wrote in the attached letter. The rest was to be divided with fairness and transparency among his children and grandchildren. He even included a personal note to me: "Elena, you've always been the steady one. Use this to build something beautiful." 1 week after the funeral, my parents called a family meeting in the living room, the same room where Sophia once built blanket forts. Marcus sat on the couch, eyes on the carpet. Mom cried softly into a tissue. Dad slid a stack of papers across the coffee table. "After everything we've suffered losing our granddaughter," Mom began, voice cracking, "this money should heal what's left of us. Marcus lost a child. He carries a pain we can't imagine. Elena, you're strong. You're doing fine on your own. You don't need as much." Dad added gently, "It's what Sophia would have wanted: unity, sacrifice. Sign these so we can keep the family whole." My stomach turned. Something in their eyes, the way they wouldn't quite meet mine, the way Marcus stayed completely silent, felt wrong. I smiled the way I always did, said I needed time to read everything carefully, and left with the papers in my bag. That night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Sophia's giggle in my head and wondering why it suddenly felt like a chain instead of a memory dot, so I did the one thing I never thought I'd do with my own blood. I hired a quiet estate lawyer and asked for every single record. What came back over the following months destroyed the last pieces of the girl who once believed family could never betray her. The manipulation had started small, right after the funeral. My parents had used the raw grief of relatives for the family's healing after losing Sophia to redirect small amounts into personal accounts. Over the years, it grew bolder. Emails I wasn't meant to see showed them discussing how to handle Elena because I was too independent and wouldn't understand the family's needs after everything we've lost. Bank statements painted a clear, horrifying picture: nearly $4.6 million in redirected funds, altered documents, side accounts, and transfers that were never meant to happen. Money that Grandpa had specifically set aside for. Sophia's scholarship had quietly disappeared into renovations for my parents' house, a new car for Marcus, and emotional support expenses. They had used Sophia's name in letters to other grieving aunts and uncles to justify taking larger shares. Every guilt trip I had endured was part of the strategy. I sat in my car in the lawyer's parking lot for over an hour, papers shaking in my hands, sobbing so hard my chest hurt. These were the same hands that once pushed me on the backyard swing while I squealed with delight. The same voices that once sang me to sleep with lullabies. Now they had spent 10 years turning the purest grief in our family into a weapon to control, isolate, and steal from me. I felt shattered, not just betrayed, but erased. Yet in the middle of that darkness, something inside me stopped breaking and started burning. The tears eventually dried. The self-doubt hardened into steel. I spent the next months in secret, organizing every receipt, every timestamp transfer, every email chain, every notarized discrepancy. I built a folder so complete it felt like armor. $4.6 million in undeniable proof. I kept smiling on phone calls. I let them believe I was still the same guilt-ridden daughter. But inside, I was preparing. Thanksgiving was only weeks away. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and bright. I drove the familiar route with a black folder resting on the passenger seat like a passenger itself. The trees were bare, leaves crunching under my tires as I pulled into the driveway of the house where I once believed love could never lie. I wore a simple navy dress, my hair in a soft low bun the way Sophia used to try to copy when she played dress up. No drama, just truth. Inside, the house smelled exactly like every Thanksgiving I could remember. Sage and butter, cinnamon from the pies cooling on the windowsill, wood smoke drifting from the fireplace. The long oak table was set with the same faded floral plates and the children's tablecloth, with Sophia's little pink handprints still visible in the corner. Marcus was there with his new girlfriend, looking uncomfortable. Mom fussed over the turkey, her eyes already red. Dad carved with the same silver knife, forcing cheer into his voice. They hugged me tightly. So good to have you home after everything we've been through. And I let them. We sat. Conversation started light. The weather, work, polite memories of happier times. Then, as it always did, the tone shifted. Mom sighed deeply over her plate and said, "Family is about sacrifice, especially after losing Sophia. Some of us carry heavier burdens. We have to support each other, even if it means putting our own dreams on hold for the greater good." Dad nodded, glancing at me meaningfully. Marcus pushed mashed potatoes around his plate without looking up. I set my fork down gently. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my voice came out calm and clear, the way I had practiced in the mirror for weeks. "I've been thinking about sacrifice a lot lately," I said. "About Sophia. About what real love and real grief actually look like." The room went completely still. Even the fireplace seemed to quiet. I reached for the folder and began laying the documents on the table one by one, highlighted bank statements, printed emails, transfer records, the original woe beside the altered versions. The numbers glowed under the chandelier light. $4.6 million. I loved Sophia with every single piece of my heart. I continued, my voice steady even as tears welled in my eyes. I can still feel her sticky fingers in mine when we made cookies. I still hear her whispering, "I love you, Auntie," before she fell asleep on my shoulder. Her death broke something in all of us that may never fully heal. But taking her innocent memory, her name, her story, and using it to manipulate documents, to redirect money Grandpa clearly intended for her scholarship, to guilt me into disappearing from this family, that isn't grief. That isn't love. That is betrayal. Mom's face went ash white. She clutched her napkin like it could save her. Dad's hand froze midair, the carving knife still in his grip. Marcus looked like he might be sick. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I walked them through everything. The small redirects right after the funeral when grief was freshest. The larger ones over the years, the emails where they planned how to handle me. Sophia deserves better than to have her short life turned into a tool for greed, I said softly. And so do I. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Mom started crying, real broken sobs this time. Dad tried to protest, but the paper trail sat between the cranberry sauce and the stuffing like an uninvited guest that refused to leave. Marcus finally whispered, "I didn't know it was this bad." But we all knew he had chosen silence for too long. By the time I stood up to leave that night, everything had shifted. They knew my lawyer had copies. They knew the truth could no longer be buried under Sophia's name. In the weeks that followed, the legal process began quietly but firmly. The misused funds are being corrected, a large portion finally flowing into Sophia's scholarship exactly as Grandpa wanted. The rest returned to the estate. The family I once knew no longer exists in the same form, but the lies no longer own me. I walked out of that house into the cold night air and took the deepest breath I'd taken in 10 years. The weight I had carried, the guilt, the doubt, the manipulated grief, lifted enough for light to finally reach the cracks. Sophia's memory belongs to me again. Not as a weapon, but as the pure, bright joy she was. The girl who danced in the kitchen with flour on her nose. Who believed princesses could feel a single pea through 20 mattresses. Who taught me that love is supposed to feel safe. That's how I honor her now, if this nightmare taught me anything. It's this. Blood does not automatically mean safety. Real family protects your heart instead of sharpening your wounds into knives. Grief is sacred ground. Never let anyone build a weapon on it. When the people who are supposed to love you most try to bury you under the weight of shared pain, you have every right to stand up, speak the truth, and choose yourself, because on the other side of the deepest betrayal, when you finally refuse to be erased, something beautiful happens. You don't just survive. You heal, you breathe, you become free. I'm Alina. I faced the darkest weapon my family could forge against me. And today, with my head high and my heart slowly, gently mending, I am finally completely free.